Welcome back to MVP Podcast, Season 3, Episode 18. We have Chris Seveney. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, perfect. On the show, thanks for giving us the time. Coming to us from the DC area.
Correct.
So the same weather is here in Wisconsin, as I was told.
Yes.
So welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here and giving us the time.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for having me on the podcast. Happy to be here and discuss more than weather, but to discuss real estate, because it's an area that I can talk about all day long. So I know we could be here for days talking about real estate, but excited to be here today.
Yeah, and you've been in it for, you said, over 25 years.
Correct.
Hitting multiple different facets of real estate. One being notes, which I think we should touch on the show, because not a lot of people understand what notes are and how those are utilized within real estate. So if we can get into notes on that, obviously I want to know the road and the path that took you to where you're at, because what we're finding with a lot of our guests is they'll start out as teachers, or they'll just start out in general construction or something not even close to real estate. And then find their way into the wonderful world, and then they're stuck. And I'm gonna say stuck positively, not negatively, in real estate. So while we jump into it, why don't you just tell us what you do now and how you got there into the position you are?
Yep. No, absolutely. So today we manage 5 real estate note funds. So we go out and raise money from accredited investors and put them in syndications to go out and buy pools of notes. So that's kind of quick version of what we do. We'll talk about notes down the road. I think it's important also to understand how I got here, because it is a very similar story to most people, I think, and people are at very different paths in their career. And it's good to show, some of those stages. So back, like you said, 25 years ago, I graduated college. It was civil engineering degree, and I thought I'd be designing bridges and buildings for my career. And when I was applying for jobs, I realized, I'm like, do I really want to sit in an office and just design bridges all day long? From that perspective. So a lot of engineers also do go off into construction management. And the reason they do that is, one, you're on project sites, so you get to build cool buildings. And for people who don't know what a construction manager is, the best way to explain it is, if you walk by a job site and you see the guy in the white shirt and tie not doing anything, that's what it is. But they actually do a lot of things. So that's what I did for 15 years. I managed construction projects, and I was working for one of the largest general contractors up in the Boston area. So I got to work with a lot of experienced people and a lot of people who are a lot smarter than me. I know some people always go back and forth about, education and working in corporate America and just going out on your own. For me personally, that experience of seeing how large businesses operate and manage in systems and processes, which as an engineer, that's what type of person I am. It was very helpful to get from where I am today. After about 15 years though, I got completely burnt out because working, 60 plus hours per week. And there's a joke of going over to the dark side when you're in construction, which is going to work for a developer. That's considered the dark side. So I went and kind of worked for the dark side, working for a developer. And my boss at the time was, talking to me. He's like, so, what are you doing for, and this was about a decade ago. He's like, what are you going to be doing for, your retirement? I'm like, well, I got 401k. And he just started laughing at me. And he's like, why aren't you buying real estate? I'm like, well, I don't have time. He's like, you got to start buying real estate for yourself. He owns some rentals in San Diego and other places. And it kind of hit me. It's like, yeah, actually, he's kind of right. And I love real estate. So my wife and I built our primary residence, and we acted as a general contractor on it. And then after that, we had a lot of equity in our property. So we went and started buying some rentals in the DC area that needed rehab. So we'd rehab them and get them, rent them, and hold them for cash flow. If anyone listens to Bigger Pockets, it's the BRRRR strategy.
Oh yeah,
is what we're doing. But for those not familiar with the DC market, it's highly competitive and it is extremely expensive. And at the time, my wife, we still do, but we had 2 young kids at the time, and spending our weekends trying to manage these projects, because anyone who's ever tried to renovate anything, if you just let your contractor, do their own thing, they're never going to show up. You need to be there every day and so forth. So we were spending a lot of our weekends managing these projects in with kids and sports. It became too much. And my wife finally came to me and said, no more, no more rentals. So, okay. But she didn't say no more real estate. So, the engineer in me was like,
the loophole.
The loophole. Yes, the loophole. So I was on Bigger Pockets, and I started looking at tax liens, because tax liens were something that, it's like, oh, you just buy the lien, don't have to do anything. But the group on Bigger Pockets is tax liens and notes. And this was around 2016 timeframe. And all of a sudden I'm like, I got really pissed off at myself, because, I've been in the business for 15 plus years. I never knew about notes. And, most people know about private lending, which is a type of note, but most people didn't know that you can go buy a distressed mortgage from a hedge fund at, 50 cents on the dollar, and basically try and work that out. And that's where the light bulb went off, because the way it works is, it's really, you can do it from anywhere at any point in time. So, my wife goes to bed early, I can do it at night, from that perspective. So it fit me perfectly in that type of business, for, how I got to where I got today. And over the last 6 years, I started at 0, and now I've bought over 500 notes.
Wow. That's impressive. And how did you jump in? Obviously the concept came to you.
Yep.
But how are you? Okay, I'm used to managing these tangible products. I'm seeing the building get built. I'm seeing us plan out this development of what it's going to be. We've got permanent plans to look at. And now you're in this secondary market where you're buying something that's not tangible. I mean, yes, you could hold the note, but it's a secondary market. How did you make that leap or get comfortable with making that shift in your business?
Yeah. So let me first kind of, again, for people listening, explain what a note is, just so they understand, the concept of it, because most people think you're buying the real estate, which you're not. For anybody who's ever owned a property that has a mortgage on it, there's 2 documents as part of that transaction. There's the note, which is the IOU, which is saying I'm borrowing from PNC Bank, and I'm just using them as an example because most people know PNC is. I'm borrowing $250,000 from you, and I'm basically going to use that money to buy a house. So the note is the IOU, and then there's a document, either a mortgage or deed of trust, depending on the state, that what that does is that collateralizes the note. That basically is the handcuffs that tie the note to the property, which means if you don't pay me the money, this mortgage, I can basically has terms that I can go remedy by foreclosing or taking the property back. So most people think of a note and mortgage in the same instrument. They're actually 2 different. One's the IOU, and the other is if you don't meet the terms of the IOU, basically I have that property. So I just wanted to explain that. So when you mentioned tangible, because it is a little different, but you still really are, looking at the asset, because with notes, there's first position and then there's second position, which are lines of credit. And we're not going to get too much into differences between the 2, but, when you're buying a note, we always try and get the borrower repaying on that loan because it's more profitable. We can talk about that later, but you need to understand what that asset is worth. Now, you don't get to go look inside it. You have somebody go drive by the property, look at it to get an idea of what the property is. Most people who can't pay their mortgage probably don't have brand new kitchens and flooring and everything else in their properties. So that's something you have to realize. It's not comparable to the house next door that just got renovated, because you got to really focus on. So when you say, it is something tangible, but one of the benefits of notes that we like to say is, compared to rentals, is, you're not dealing with the tenants, the toilets, or the termites for the most part, because if their toilet breaks, great. You don't call your mortgage company. I mean, I don't know if I don't. And if I did, they'd probably laugh at me, but I also probably could never get anybody on the phone anyways, from the mortgage company. So that's one of the positives about it. If you're investing on the performing side, or if you have notes that are performing, it's, hey, look, I'm just a lender on this, and I just have a company that I hire to collect those payments for me.
That's awesome. And do you usually buy the notes that are in distress already? Or because you said you buy groups or bundles of them?
Yep.
Is it really a mixed bag of some are performing, paying well, some are delinquent, and now you're going to have to take the steps to get them either back on track or go into like the foreclosure route that you were saying before?
Yep. So yeah, we like to buy the distressed assets because you can buy them at a discount. So similar to people who like to buy houses that need renovation, you get them at a lower price, you put in, roll up your sleeves, do a little elbow grease and work, and potentially you reap the benefits of that. So yeah, we buy them. Yeah. They call them pools, is what they call them where you buy groups of them. And typically I like to keep a portfolio of about 70%, 60 to 70% distressed and 30 to 40% paying. And the reason why I like to keep my portfolio balanced is if I had all distressed, I have no money coming in the door and a lot of money outflowing for attorney fees or whatever may happen. When you have that balance, you got some money coming in that can, balance with the expenses for the time being until you work out a strategy on that distressed asset. And to give people an idea, let's say it's a, $150,000 house that they owe $100,000 on. Depending on the state, you might pay anywhere from, $50,000 to $70,000 for that note. Again, ballpark, and it fluctuates and varies, depends on seller and how distressed they are. But typically you'll pay anywhere from kind of 35 to 75 cents on the dollar for distressed debt. So that's another reason why if you're buying something that, is distressed and you get them repaying, and then you can turn around and sell that a year or two down the line. If you bought it for 50 cents on the dollar and then 2 years later, you're selling it for 75, 80, 85 cents on the dollar because they're starting to pay again, it provides a nice incentive, nice return to the investor. And you're doing a good thing by keeping somebody in their house. Yeah,
that's another big thing. I know that I was listening on Bigger Pockets to, I'm forgetting his name, but he talks about subject to, and one of the big things was trying to keep them in their house in certain circumstances. So no one likes to be displaced, and obviously it's an uncomfortable position for everybody. Obviously it's a business. I know you're not over there like rooting for people to fail. So like everybody wants people to get back on track if they can, which is a good marker to hit. It's a good effort.
And I am sitting here taking notes just so I can try to wrap my head around everything that you're saying.
Well, it's interesting though, because in most aspects of real estate, when things are, if you have like a tenant, for example, that's not paying, you just want to get them out of there, because it's, basically get out of here. I just got to bring somebody else in because it's your asset and it's not bringing in the money. On the notes, it's the way it's interesting because essentially, if you look at the numbers compare in most instances, and again, there's always, variations, but if you look at what it's going to cost you to foreclose, take that property back, try and sell it, and, as an REO, because technically it's real estate owned at that point, because you were the lender, how much are you going to get and all the work you're going to have to do compared to when you get it at a discount, reworking the plan with the borrower. It actually, I'm just going to say 9 out of 10, but the majority of times, you're going to make more money by keeping them in the property. So unlike getting a renter who's not paying and get them out as fast as possible, here you really want to try and work with them. So it actually is a win-win situation. That's one of the unique benefits. Now, again, there's certain borrowers that don't want to play ball with you and there's nothing you can do about it. There's always going to be instances where unfortunately you do have to go down that legal route and so forth. But if the borrower wants to play ball, that's one of the things that we like to tell people early on is, when you look at the numbers, you're going to probably do better off, trying to play ball with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And obviously in this industry, you're balancing people and money and assets.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as you want to just work with the assets, there are people involved in feelings and emotions and all that stuff. So you hope that you find a borrower that understands that you're not out to get them. Like you didn't buy this note and think like, yes, I'm going to go evict these people out of their homes. That's not the perspective we're going at.
It's not, but unfortunately with the media and the reputation that banks have, and from a decade, well, now it's almost 15 years ago, what's gone on in banks with short sales back in the day, never responding to people or taking months or years to, and people's, trying to pay, but the banks wouldn't accept the money. And all they're doing is the fees and the interest accruing. And then basically it comes to a point where they're like, screw it, and they just leave. Is a bad reputation. And one of the things we try and have, like, we don't personally speak to borrowers. We use licensed third-party companies that do all of that, but we try and let them know, hey, look, this is a private, it's a private institution that owns this. They can make decisions on the spot. We're not like a large institution where, oh, can we, modify this loan, where if you went to a national lender, they're going to take 4 months to probably agree to that. Yeah. I can literally on that phone call say yes, no, or how about this, and get it done at the snap of a finger, get the documents drafted the next day, send a mobile notary to the house, and you're done within a week.
Yeah. And that's the teeter-totter of, okay, we've got a big company that's got a lot of backing and maybe financially and manpower, but they've got all the processes set, and this is the way that they do it. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. If we don't go 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't get done. Now you've got the smaller company over here that, yes, we're not as big as this big national conglomerate, but we can pivot on a dime. Something comes up, we can do our own rules, we can make our own things happen, which if a borrower's been beaten down by this big conglomerate bank and is like, I'm so sick of it, and then you come in and you're like, hey, what do you need? This is what we need. Let's come to an agreement. It is more personable, and hopefully you're finding more and more people are on board with it.
Well, I've spoken to several borrowers in the past, and the first question I ask them will be, okay, how can we help you to get this resolved? And they're just blown away because they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, hey, look, if I tell you that your payment's going to be $1,000 per month and you're like, I can't afford it, it makes 0 sense for me to even propose it because we lost already and we're just going to be in the same place. So when you're trying, and when they hear that from you and you explain, hey, look, we're a small firm that, we have, dozen employees or whatever the case may be. And we're trying to, there's minimums that we have to reach, and we'll let you, it's got to be at least this, but we can, we'll work with you on that. And then, again, with larger institutions, they got their box, and at no point in time do they ever vary from that box. It's like, okay, they got the playbook that, is sketched in. It's the same playbook, and it's, painful to go through that process where, I'd say we have rules we have to follow, of course, but, our playbook is what's going to work for you, and how can we make this work? And within our limits, ours is a much bigger circle that we can go outside the box on.
Yeah. It reminds me on the lending side. I mean, you're obviously in the notes section of it, but Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, those loans, you're either in this box or we're out. Like, it's your house and you are fitting in this box. Otherwise we can't help you. But then there's other private mortgages that mortgage lenders that are like, we don't have a box. Just let's get this deal done and we'll work with you and you work with us and we'll get it done. I think that kind of lending is being pushed more and more now because everybody's in a different situation. I think the secondary market has gotten way, way bigger too. So there's more and more opportunities for people like you are in your position to get on notes and succeed. So I don't know if you're seeing that industry grow larger.
It's definitely grown larger. And what's happened a little bit is it used to be much easier to be a little, I'll call it mom and pop shop, like an individual investor to start to do this. And it's gotten a little more challenging, to be frank. And the reason why has been, the government never in a million years, I think, ever thought that these loans would make their way down to mom and pop investors. Typically, they get bought, they get sold, securitized, and people invest in them. Now, these loans are being broken from being securitized, and hedge funds are buying them, and then they're making their way down. So the government hasn't really caught up to that yet in regards to the rules and the licensing. Over the last few years, they have been, because just like any business, there's very scrupulous people out there who are lending when they shouldn't be lending, or they're taking money, too much money up front, or what, putting people in loans that are set to fail. And over the last 3 to 4 years, you've seen lawsuits against some of these large firms that were doing that. And the states have gotten a lot more strict on things. So the cost to do business has gotten a little more expensive, because now, the government's stepping in, or the states are stepping in and say, okay, now you got to get a license to do this. And now I got to go spend $2,000 to invest in and do this in the state. And if somebody's got $50,000, 2%, that's 4% of your money, on deals where, that's, it's considered, it's a significant expense when you're getting started.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about the governance of that. Where is this a federal or is this a state issue? Because obviously you said you can buy notes in whatever state you want. And are those notes held primarily with smaller like town banks, or are those nationwide? Is that the delineation between where it takes over in terms of federal or state? Or is there even a definitive line of who takes what?
Yeah, it's really state. It's state by state. And unfortunately, the states are very different. It's not like, in one state, you might need a mortgage lending license. Another state, they'll call it a debt collection. Another state, it's called a servicing license. And the requirements are all different. So it's not like again, I'm not a real estate agent, but I'm guessing to be a real estate agent, it's pretty much, I would think, the same in every state on how to do that. With notes, it's completely different on the requirements in the application. There is one website you go to called the NMLS, where you have to get your licenses through. But certain states you need a license, certain states you don't. Certain states you need a certain certification, certain states you don't. Certain states you have to have certain financial requirements. Typically, the feds don't get involved unless it's really the SEC getting in, not on the notes, but how the person's raising their money. And usually if it's a significant amount, because the SEC, I don't believe will play with somebody who's got like $1 million, because it would cost them 10 million to probably go at that. Now, that the saying doesn't mean they won't. It just means typically they'll put it at the state level to go after people who are doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. Yeah.
No, that's fascinating of how many different rules and regulations you're going to have to be aware of if you're going to go out of state. And it sounds like you are out of state already.
I've invested in 40 different states.
Wow. Okay.
Do you have a favorite? Other than Wisconsin.
Yeah, I have a not favorite. So
Ohio. Not favorite, Illinois.
No, Ohio. So
really?
I joked that Ohio stands for only headaches in Ohio. So, part of why I don't say Illinois is we stay out of Cook County. Cook County. So we stay out.
We'll edit that out for all the Illinois listeners.
So but I think anybody who's in most real estate spaces knows, Cook County is a very challenging jurisdiction. But no, so favorite states really, I'm in Virginia. Virginia is a good state because it's a lender-friendly state. I would say, without getting into politics, most red states are lender friendly. Most blue states are borrower friendly. You look at the Northeast, or like New York, your foreclosure time could be up to 5 years in New York.
Yeah, I've heard about the struggles in the Northeast.
Yeah. And when you look at that, if they're not paying taxes, you have to front taxes at $10,000 a year, that's $50,000 extra dollars that you're out of pocket. Now you take that same property in Georgia. Today's Friday, May 6th. 6th. If you had somebody not paying in Georgia, their foreclosure sale will be the first Tuesday of July. So to give you an
that
idea,
quick, huh?
yeah. So to give you an idea of the differences, most people love Texas. Texas is also a very quick state as well. The Southeast is probably where the prime majority of our assets are located. I say go to Rust Belt. If you go from Wisconsin, Michigan, and just kind of like put your hand across like the board of states and swath down to the Southeast, that's primarily.
So just east of the Mississippi is where we're staying.
Yeah. And a lot of it is because that's where the largest amount of delinquencies are. Home values in those areas typically tend to be under 250 to 300,000. California, typically, the banks or the large institutions hold that paper because of the value of the property and the value of the asset. One thing that people have to realize is whether it's a $50,000 house or a $50 million house, the cost to foreclose on that property in the legal process is the same process. So when you think about it from an institutional standpoint, do they want to focus on their delinquent loans that are like $1 million loans, or do they want to think about the ones in, Southern Ohio that are $75,000, $50,000 properties? For them, it's not worth their time or effort. They'd rather sell those off and keep the ones, because most institutions also they're limited for bandwidth on their how many you can manage. So if they have an influx of delinquencies, they're going to take the cream of the crop. They can't manage these other ones. So what are they going to do? If we can't do anything with them, they're just going to sit there. So let's sell them, get the money, and then go back and buy some of the bigger assets. So
do you think it's kind of weird to think about? There's a pocket of delinquencies, and you said that Southeast seems to have a big pocket of delinquencies. Mm-hmm. Do you guys look into the analytics of why that might be, or is there one root cause, or is it all different?
We've somewhat looked at it, but I think really what it comes down to is, jobs. When you really think about it, most people, and that's one of the interesting things when you own the property, if you own your house and so forth, if your house drops 20% in the next month, as long as you have your job, do you really care? You're still paying your mortgage. From that perspective. Now, if it dropped 80%, you might say, hey, maybe I need to move somewhere. And, some people might strategically walk away from it, but most people don't. But it's really the job market. And, finding jobs and where the jobs are is, critical because, like I said, house prices are going to fluctuate, go up and down over time. I know the last few years it's been great for housing, but, most times in a down economy or if house pricing starts to slide, interest rates are going up now. I think part of it is the jobs, but also 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And, with inflation going up, the cost of everything going up, property taxes, because all these jurisdictions are getting crushed with COVID, probably that's going to go up. It's the people who are making, it's a lot of the blue collar workers who are making, anywhere from $30,000 to $75,000 per year. All their expenses go up. They get, unfortunately, they need some assistance. So, that's where you typically see it. People who live in areas like, I'll use Northern Virginia, the average house here is probably, $750,000. We got the federal government here that, pays people very, very well. Most of those people, have, their house, and they also have some savings and money aside for the rainy day fund. It's much more challenging or difficult for, some of the blue collar people or people in other regions to try and save that nest egg based on the data that says 65% of people live paycheck to paycheck. So
that's an alarming percentage. I didn't know it was that high. But now that you say it, I definitely can see it. I just don't think I ever tried to put a number on it. I knew it was the majority, but
and I think that number came from like DS News or, that's not my number. I read that somewhere. Now, its accuracy, I just remember that because it was like mind blowing when I saw what it was.
Yeah. If anybody wants to fact check the number, they can, but I think that's ballpark right. That seems like it would be more in line with what it would be.
Yeah. And I think also, a lot of investors, live in, coastal areas as well. And again, I know you're not, but
I wish. I was born in the wrong state.
Okay.
I want to be in like Texas or Southern California, Florida, like somewhere warm.
I'll take Oregon any day.
Yeah.
That's too rainy,
But
too cold.
I think people don't realize, housing in other different markets. And because you don't have to, it's like, oh yeah, I've lived in, Massachusetts for a while where it's expensive. Then I lived in DC area. So again, I've lived in two expensive areas. When I got into notes and realized that I literally could buy a house for the same price in certain areas that I paid for my stove in my house. It's ridiculous. I mean, I had a property in Flint, Michigan that, I think we paid, $5,000 for. And then we turned around.
There was a story on Bigger Pockets. Someone got started investing and it was a single mom. I don't know if it was one kid or two kids, but she was telling her backstory. And she was like, I made the jump into real estate. I bought my first house, $5,000. And I'm sitting there like, what house are you buying for $5,000? But they went into the economics behind it in that area, and it made sense.
And I could tell you, this house was not a bad house.
Right.
It was an REO that the company had a loan with somebody on it. They stopped paying. They walked out. They gave them cash for keys back. And as part of a pool, they wanted to get rid of it because they were closing the fund. It was like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,200 square foot house. It needed some clean out. It needed, basically adjustment of the cabinet doors and some other things, but it wasn't I mean, I could share some houses with you that would just blow your mind. It wasn't, it was basically pretty much livable. So we, did some cosmetic stuff to it, got it fixed up, and ended up getting somebody in there and essentially seller financed it for like $35,000. And then, held the note for a while and then actually sold it to a good friend of mine, bought the note and so forth. But yeah, even if it was $25,000 or $35,000, I mean, again, up in Boston, you can't buy a parking space for under $75,000, never mind a house. So it's very different.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the house prices in different areas. And even when we're looking at the coastal cities to try and find a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house that here might be, I'm trying to think of the last 2-bedroom, it would have been $100,000. I bought my last 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. Yeah. Out in California, I don't know, 400, maybe?
Depends. Could be even more than that. I've got somebody I know who lives in Northern California, and 1,200 square foot homes in their neighborhood go for like $2 million. I mean, it's blows your mind.
Wish.
Yeah.
I wish.
So one of the things that kind of I want to leads into that I forgot to even mention is one of the other things that's great about notes is your capital, because I started with roughly about $30,000. That was some retirement money I had in it was a solo 401k, which most, an IRA essentially. There's a difference, but most people know them by IRAs. Because what can happen is, like you just mentioned, $100,000 house. Well, let's say that person's got a mortgage that they've been paying for several years and stuff, and say the balance of that loan is only $20,000 now. You might only, and if they're paying, you might pay $15,000 for that note on $100,000 property. So that's the great thing with notes is, while you're backed by the property, the amount of money owed on that note can vary significantly. So we'll see a lot of notes that have balances of $15,000 to $35,000. And with that, you can pick up, several of them for, like 10 grand. I bought, some notes with $7,000 balance left that I paid like $4,000 for. So it's something that can have a low cost of entry. And when you get started, that was one of the things I did is like, hey, look, I'm not, throwing all this money at one note, because if I did something wrong, it all goes awry, where I bought like 4 notes starting out, and I bought some in bankruptcy, some that were distressed, some are performing, and I paid 4 of them. The average was like around $7,500 per loan, because they had those low balances. But I basically got that experience instead of going and paying some guru, $10, $20, $30,000 to learn it. Hey, I'll learn by doing. And with 4 of them, like, okay, even if I screw up one of them, cost of doing business type thing, I'd rather learn the hard way than pay somebody to teach me that then just continues to sell me on additional training. So,
yeah. And there's so much information out. I mean, you mentioned Bigger Pockets. And if you're thinking about getting into real estate, other than this podcast, please listen to Bigger Pockets, because they bring in people from all different facets of real estate. if you want to get into anything, there's going to be multiple shows on Bigger Pockets on that topic. With, if you go to their website and buy their pro membership, they've got reading material and books and all this information. But really, I listened to them for maybe 2.5 years before I even committed to doing real estate. And I was like, all right, now I feel ready. And I got into my first one and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So even all the listening, all the reading you can do, until you get doing it, it's going to feel foreign. You're going to feel like an idiot. You're going to feel like you have no idea what's going on. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. Now, the analogy I like to use is, if you've ever golfed, and, if you can sit there and watch a million golf videos on how to hit off the tee. Yeah. And it is a waste of time, because the moment you stand there and, you put the club in your hand and you try and get that adjustment, that swing and so forth, until you swing and hit the ball, that's reality. And that's real estate investing. Everything you did before that, it's great that you can watch it and you might pick up a few tips and so forth. But until you realize, okay, keep the shoulder under the chin or whatever the case may be, until you get up there and hit it and then realize, oh, I opened my wrist and it took a hard, sharp right, or I, rolled my wrist and took the hard left, that's the adjustment. And then that's what real estate investing is you got to get up on the tee and just start swinging. And that's the way you're going to learn.
And I think it's appropriate. I was just golfing the other day. So
my slice is brutal. Having the baseball swing, my wrist open, or I don't know what they call it in golf, but like I snap my wrist is what you'd say it in baseball. Do the same thing for golf, and this thing just takes off on me. Dogleg lefts, though, I will do so great. I'll aim right at the fairway. It'll end up in the fairway somewhere. Those are perfect.
Yeah. So.
You had brought up funding, and I wanted to touch on that because early on the show you talked about syndications and all that. So you said you started with 30,000. The rest of all this is all syndication, which means other people's money in layman's terms. So go into that. How did you find that? Because that's a huge obstacle for people getting into real estate. I don't have money. That's like the first objection they'll throw. I don't have money.
So the first 30,000 was basically my own. And you're right, it is really challenging to get into real estate without any money. I always tell people you need something. And I'm a big proponent, honestly, of don't take people's money until you've used your own and you've gone through that process. Yeah. So what I ended up doing was, this is interesting, and if you can probably relate to this. So I started doing it, with my own money. And then I started joining some groups, some Facebook groups, as well as, some weekend training courses that were low dollar. Maybe it was $100 or $500 to take like a week, a training seminar and so forth. And a lot of times that training person would give you you'd ask for like, hey, can I get the list of the other attendees? Or you go into like, if they're using whichever software, look at everyone else and grab their email address. So, I bought the first 4. Then after I did that, I did take a little bit. It took me about 6 months before I bought a note. First off, I did 6 months of research, analysis paralysis. Everybody has it. It's going to happen. Bought 4 notes. And then after about 6 months after I bought them, my father passed away. So it kind of took, a few month break from there. Yep. And then basically some of those loans I had, one of them paid off. So I kind of like reinvested, got some of my money back. I had a little extra money still on the sidelines, put that in. And then what I started to do is, most people, probably realize this, probably 90 to 95% of real estate investors who want to be a real estate investor don't become a real estate investor. Yeah. And what I was finding is I'd be on all these classes with people and I'd see the same people everywhere. So what I started doing is reaching out and just saying, hey, just checking in, how you doing with notes and so forth. Just curious if you bought any, love to share stories and stuff. And I'd always get back, I haven't bought anything. I'm frustrated, blah, blah, blah. So then I started reaching out and said, hey, look, I've got, I've been getting some deals come my way and stuff. If you want a joint venture on them, basically we can do a JV deal. And, basically I call it like a learn and earn as well. I can share some of my stuff to give you a little bit more experience, because a lot of the, call it the big gurus and stuff, they don't have the time. to work with you. So I'd reach out to people in this training groups. Right off the bat, I got like 7 or 8 people like, oh, that would be awesome. Yep. And I'm like, oh, okay.
That's a really good idea.
So I got like 7 or 8 people. Then all of a sudden, I went and bought 7 or 8 notes. And then all of a sudden they've got a friend as well. And then all of a sudden 7 to 8 turned into 10 to 12, who turned into 15 to 20. Next thing I know, I've got like 50 JV partners. And all of a sudden, I was also, working full time and stuff and managing everything. And the challenge is, so with a JV, it's got to be one person per asset. You can't mix, commingle and stuff. And, the ways to make sure you do it is they have to have some active interest in it as well and so forth. But, so I was doing that. But every month I'd report, and it's basically 50 reports I'd have to produce every month. So
on top of the full-time job, on top of kids, on top of the wife.
So eventually in 2019, in late 2018, I started. So I always like to, think big, call it the BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. So I had my attorney.
I like that. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah. It's from the book Traction by Gino Wickman, I believe. Great book.
It's on my list of books to read among other like 20 to 30 other books. But
the best thing about it is he basically has you create a 1-page business plan, because everyone creates this business plan that's like 50 pages long and you never read it. You never go to it. It's 1-page business plan of columns of actionable items broken down by immediate, the quarter, the year, and like the 3-year. And it's like, and I'll gladly email me afterwards. I'll share the template with you. It's awesome. So I had my attorney start putting together documents for to do a syndication. So it was a Regulation D 506B, which is it's exempt from SEC registration, but it allowed me to. I couldn't solicit to investors, but what I was going to do is take my existing investor pool and kind of basically merge them all into one entity. Instead of reporting 50 different times, it's like, hey, look, I can just take, basically instead of one asset, it's 50 assets with 50 different people, but they own a piece of every single one. So it also reduces the risk.
Yeah.
So I had him put that together, and it was putting together. And then all of a sudden, I was just doing my thing, and a seller comes to me and says, hey, we've got 90 loans we need to sell, and we need to sell them as an entire pool. And the pool, roughly, let's say it was $1 million for the pool. It was roughly, I think it was like 800 something thousand. So it's only like $9,000 per asset. And there was a good amount of them that were performing in this pool. The balance on the loans at the time we bought it for 40 cents on the dollar. So it was roughly like 2.2 million of balance owed on the mortgage that we got for so I'm like, oh my God, how do I do this? So I called a partner who I've done some work with, and actually who was my co-host of the podcast at the time. And it's like, okay, we're going to do this. And she's like, yeah, right. I'm like, oh no, we're going to go do this. So we literally raised $900,000 in like a week from investors that we knew. And we bought these 90 assets. And at the time I had also started to do a podcast as well. And between those 2 events, that to me was kind of like, the tipping, where, everything tipped. And all of a sudden my business from there just started to grow and grow and grow. So, and it's a typical way most investors do it is, okay, I start myself, go small. You don't want to get too big too fast, because that's where you can get yourself in trouble. Most businesses fail because of cash flow, not because of profit. So we slowly kept growing, and then all of a sudden kind of hit that point of that opportunity came, and I just took it. And basically, one of the reasons I took it were other people wanted it, but they didn't want to take certain assets in there. And it's like, hey, look, if 80 of these assets are really good and 10 are junk, guess what? You're still making a really good deal. So I think some people miss that mindset. So so that was, we put that into a syndication, and then that went really well. So I just continued to, then I made the shift to go to what's called the 506C, which only allows accredited investors to invest, but I could advertise. So when opportunities came up, $1 million, somebody had $1 million of assets, I'd go out and raise $1 million and then go buy the pool and put those investors in there. So, 5 times we've done that now, and then we're working on a new venture right now that, I can't, unfortunately, from law regulations, I can't say too much about it, but it's going to allow for both accredited and not accredited investors to invest at a very low investment amount. So basically, we're really going to open it up, which hopefully will allow us to raise a lot more money to go out and invest in additional assets. Similar to real estate, over the last few years, our pricing has gotten significantly more expensive, just like real estate has. The returns still can be there. I will tell people from a returns perspective on performing loans, expect between 8 and 12% annual return. And then on non-performing stuff, we used to try and target about a 30% return on those. That's probably dropped down now to the low to mid 20s is what you want to target, because you have to factor in the risk. There's a lot of risk involved in this. People got to be careful of, they're not trying to buy some of this stuff for 10 to 15%, because your margins are, if you think of a $30,000 asset, a 10% margin is only $3,000. $3,000 is an attorney misfiles your foreclosure complaint, and then that's a $3,000 bill to refile it. So you want to make sure you leave, those, some margin. Just like if you're renovating a property, if somebody tells you 50 grand, budget 60 to 75, just the budget, so you have some margin for yourself. Yeah.
And those are things that with experience you come to know where you need to create that buffer. And the more and more you do it, the more and more in sync with it you are, and you're aware of them as they come up. What I really liked what you did when you started was a lot of the people starting, you reach out to and you're like, hey, how's it going? They're like, I haven't started. And then you kind of gave them like the power of numbers. You like brought them together, like, all right, rather than all of us doing it by ourselves, let's all come together. I'm sure they felt a little safer making the jump with someone else who's already been doing it. I'm imagining that's what that came from. And then when you brought them all in together, and they were able to take a little chunk of the whole pie to lower their liability on it, I'm sure they're all happy with that one too.
Yeah. And the way it's also, I frame it for people, again, I'm a numbers guy. So I just give me a spreadsheet and, I'm like a little kid with a lollipop, you're just going to sit there and you can leave the kid alone for 3 hours. I'm the same on a spreadsheet. So the way Natasha likes that one.
I've never heard lollipop and spreadsheet in the same sense.
But the way I'd frame it too is, when you look at the startup costs of, okay, I got to get, software, I got to access to certain things, like people use PropStream as a company, a lot of people use, or I use DataTree. You basically got to set up your email, the website, all that information. When you look at what your startup cost is, which is a few $1,000s minimum, and if somebody has like 25 grand to invest, and you say, hey, look, I can target, you never promise, please don't ever promise returns to anybody. I can promise. Yeah, there you go. I'm going to target to get you a 12 to 15% return on your money. If you try and go do it yourself with 25,000 and you got 2,000 in startup costs, you got to basically be at 30%. Or whatever the numbers is. I would show them that and explain to them. And then this doesn't even include the amount of time that you spend on these assets. What's your time worth? And I spend most of the time and then confer with you. When you share that with everybody and then explain to them, sometimes they're hesitant, but then when you start sharing the stories, because, basically if you ever watch the show Cops, I don't think it's on anymore, but that's kind of
they brought it back.
Oh, they did?
They brought it back.
Like anytime you think you're having a bad day, just go watch Cops. You're going to feel much, much better. But it's similar. Those stories are similar to like some of our borrowers. Like there's stuff that you just can't believe, some of these stories. I mean, I've had stories where I've had dead borrowers show up in court. The borrower is deceased, but then somebody shows up in court saying they're the borrower, and the attorney's like, you're dead. So because it's somebody pretending to be them because they're trying. Yeah, because it's so usually a family member they're living in the house and haven't been paying because they're like, oh, well, you know, the dead guy, they think, oh, the dead guy doesn't have to pay his mortgage anymore. No, somebody's still got to pay, and then you got to go through probate and stuff. So they'll show up and basically be like, oh yeah, well, we'll try, can we get a modification? It's like, you're dead. Like, you know, so
interesting.
Yeah, it's amazing how many, I think I have one borrower who set the record for COVID because I believe probably like 7 or 8 times in the span of like 3 months, they had COVID. So
wow.
you know, so.
That's devastating.
Yes. So, you know, every time that you call, it's like, I can't work because I have COVID. I can't work. I have COVID. I mean, it's like, you know, maybe you should, you know, stay home and, you know, stay away from people for a little bit of time and stuff. Yeah. So
I have a big question on their immune system. They're catching COVID 7 times in a month.
Yeah. I mean, I've had people whose grandmothers, you know, again, I don't know how many times they've been adopted because, you know, they've had about 7 grandmothers pass away, you know, as well. So, you know, it's, you know, very interesting. You need to create
a collage of all the excuses or all the bizarre scenarios.
You know, it's almost like with contractors too, like all the excuses that from contractors' mouths, I feel like are the same that you are doing.
Yes. And it's the stuff that you can't make this stuff up. You literally can't make this stuff up. I mean, if I was that creative, I'd be writing books, you know.
With all the excuses. That's what I was thinking of doing for my contractors. Yeah. So
what are those boards, Natasha? You may know what they are. It looks back on all the things you type, but the more words you type, the bigger it is on the collage.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know what they're
like a Venn diagram almost.
Kind of, but it's
it's a picture with all the words that you see or use in a year. And the more you use that word, the bigger space it takes up in the whole picture.
Yeah.
So I guess like COVID would be like the whole right side of this thing.
So
that's funny,
man. Yeah, it's fun to hear. I mean, it's not fun. I won't say fun. It's interesting to hear all of the excuses that could come with real estate or whatever facet or industry you're in within real estate. Because working with tenants, you get the same excuses of like, hey, where's the rent? Well, this and that and this. Okay, it works once. The second, 5th, 10th time, it's like, we got to figure something else out.
I like to say entertaining, but in the same token, I will caution people, like, I'll talk about this and yes, you make money. I mean, I've had properties that literally, I've had $13,000 trash outs in properties. I've had properties that are just completely destroyed. As well, I've had properties where the borrowers set the property on fire the day before foreclosure. Unfortunately, I've had, you know, properties or, you know, where somebody was murdered on a property as well. So, you know, there's also reality that is, you know, you can, I don't want to term joke, but you can get, you know, some comedic entertainment relief out of some of these crazy stories, but also there's also, you know, real life things. I had a borrower recently who is a grandmother who had trouble making some payments, and she was in a major car accident where one of her children passed away in the car accident. And basically she was driving. It was a single car accident. So I don't know, you know, again, the assumption again would be probably some, you know, her fault or something happened with the car or something. But when you hear stories like that, that's where the empathetic side, you still have to, you know, make sure you have the service to like understand, like, hey, don't call the borrower up screaming at, you know, again, they should never scream, but ask the borrower where their payment is, you know, console them and ask them, okay, you know, basically, hey, take care of what you need to take care of. And, you know, let us know what works for you. And again, there's that business side of things where, you know, you have to, again, have a you know, watch your margins, but there's also the empathetic side of things of, you know, now with, you know, I'll call it ESG, you know, environmental, social, and governance side of things, where you also got to have a heart, you know. And what I found in our business is, you know, the term pigs get happy, hogs get slaughtered is very, very key in this business where, I mean, you want to make money, of course you do. And you want to try and make as much as possible, but you don't want to get greedy. You know, that's the thing. I've seen people really get greedy in this business and they get crushed.
Yep. It catches up to them eventually. It'll be the really good high upswing. And then you're going to either cross the wrong person or push somebody too hard and it will go faster downward than it did go up.
Yep. I know somebody that had a property that, they weren't in it for a lot. Let's just say, well, they're in it for probably like 50,000. And, basically, they had somebody that would have given them like 75,000 for the property, which, and it was a very quick turnaround. It was like within 6 months. So 50% in 6 months, that's like grand slam type of return. And you're like, nope, I'm gonna, basically, they didn't take the offer. And then basically, and it was like a short payoff because the person owed like $100,000 on the loan. They ended up spending about 2 years going through foreclosure, spending all the money. And at the end of the day, basically the property ended up only being worth like $65,000. So they end up basically, they still made like $5,000 on the deal. But, it was one of, I'm a fan of, bird in hand's better than two in the bush type thing. And, I've got certain, if I can make 50% in 6 months on a deal, I'm taking that deal probably 9 times out of 10, based on, what the situation is. But, they didn't want, because the person owed, like 100 and something thousand, they thought, they were like, I'm not giving this person $25,000 for free. And I'm like, you're not yes, they're eliminating $25,000 worth of debt, but I don't care what about them. What's it for your pocket? It's no different like when you buy real estate, and like, oh, well, they only bought it for 100,000. Now I'm buying it for 140. I don't care what somebody else bought it for. If at 140, I'm going to make really good money. Great. Because if I'm paying them that, they're going to bring me more deals later on and I'll continue to make more money. People don't think in that sense.
Yeah. And you've got to look at the long game of real estate. It's not a one transaction. Then I just did real estate. No, it's a process. It keeps going for years and years and years. And you got to look at the long game. Reading a book right now, and it kind of reminds me of something his grandma was telling him. It said, be nice to people on the way up because you might meet them on the way down, or something along that line. And that's the same thing in real estate. Treat everybody with respect, whether they're a tenant, whether there's somebody, another investor that you're bringing in. Not to say that you're going to come back down, but you're going to meet them again. You're going to cross paths with them again. You might as well make it good and productive for everybody. Respectful.
And that's a mistake I made early on because I am ultra type A and personality. And I know I've ticked people off and, I've, had my beefs with people early on and, basically, and this was when I was at the bottom working my way up and I just, view my, I'm like the pit bull, just, going at it and stuff. And I look back now and I've reached out to people and I've apologized. I've reached back, and so forth and said, hey, I was a jerk back then. And, so forth. So that's one of the things like early on. Yeah, I've made those mistakes and it's a really small niche market. Real estate. Notes is even smaller. Everybody knows everybody in note space. So, you basically don't want to create enemies.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
Definitely. Well, that was fascinating. This was the first show on notes that we've had. I feel like we didn't even cover like half of what notes actually are. I'm sure we could go on and on. We may have to schedule a second show to come back and talk about the last part, because I know that there's a couple questions that I had that I wanted to ask that we're not going to get to.
Okay.
So we'll have to schedule that back. But that was fascinating. I learned a lot about notes. Natasha, what does your notebook look like?
It's pretty full. It's pretty full right now, and my head's still spinning. So I'm gonna have to do some further research and really try to wrap my head around everything.
Okay, Natasha, I'm gonna give you one thing to walk away with your notebook.
All right.
Go get one of these.
What is that?
It's called the Remarkable.
Oh yes, seen those.
It is awesome, and it's a digital notebook. It feels like you're writing on paper. And I'm the type of person that when I used to carry notebooks, I'd have 7 of them and I'd always grab the wrong one, or where did I leave that note? Here, you basically create your own notebooks. You hit the button, it opens a tab. You take your notes, you hit a button, you can email it to yourself. It can, if you write neat enough, I don't, it can convert it into text for you as well. You can put templates on there for different things. And then basically the background is that template. So if you have like meeting notes or, if you, want to work out or do your schedule or your diet, all that stuff can be the background. And it's just like, writing on a piece of paper that was, basically, printed with that information on it. So
my husband needs one of those like desperately. I'm gonna surprise him with one one of those, I think.
Yeah, I show that to attorneys and they're just like, oh my God, because with all the legal pads. I saw this about a year and a half ago, and I'm like, oh, it's a savior.
That links up to Wi-Fi or?
Yep, links up to Wi-Fi, so you can email it to yourself as well. Email.
Man, that would be awesome with, I'm thinking about applications within our business. Like my foreman could take it and he always writes down like material lists or what's going on or questions. If you could just email it.
Yeah. And I mean, people sometimes get a little upset because they're like, well, it's not an iPad. And it's like, it's not meant to be. It's not meant to have apps and stuff. It's a lot less expensive. It's meant to take notes. You can read on it as well. But one of the things I like to do with it as well is if I'm like watching, say, I sign up for some podcasts. I have a podcast and I was watching something on YouTube marketing. I was on like a weekend thing that I signed up for, and they send out in advance, like all the speakers and with the PowerPoint where it's got the picture and then like the notes on the side you can take. I put that into my Remarkable and basically, download it, put it in there. And then as a speaker spoke on that page, I just made the notes and so forth. And, it was all there. And at the end of the thing, I just hit send, email to myself now, instead of trying to save those notes and then go put them in a scanner and everything else. It's all done that way.
Awesome.
Interesting. Right.
Natasha's Googling it now.
I seriously
got caught.
Yeah, I'm seriously. This is awesome. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Awesome. Well, yes, we're gonna have to get you back on again. And this was mind-boggling and really good.
Yeah, it's something that I definitely want to get into once I'm done with the development and building side of things. I'm still not done there, but that's definitely something that I've read on, I've listened. It's an interesting, fascinating world. So we will have to talk again on that.
Yeah, it's like anything. I recommend everyone diversify their portfolio. Have some rentals. You might do some new construction, might do some fix and flips. Notes is another thing. It's passive. From that, it can be passive. The one downside I'll mention to notes is it's all considered ordinary income. That's the one thing. There's no depreciation or anything. It's all ordinary income. So that's the one thing that kind of, is a Debbie Downer on it.
If you're making money, it'll be worth it. The tax, it'll be worth it.
Exactly. Yeah. So if I have to pay Uncle Sam, I don't mind because it means I'm making money.
Exactly. So we're going to end on an uphill on that one. But we appreciate the time. Thank you so much. It was a wealth of information. Thanks for sharing it for me and the viewers. Looking forward to the next show where we can expand on it a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Hopefully you get some warm weather out there.
Hopefully. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.